Hello YouTubers, I have a little information video here I'd like to put together for you. Anybody who owns one of these L2850 GST transmission Kubota tractors, super good piece of machinery, but there's a shifter problem with them. On the shifter, there's a GST shifter and it's situated right about here. I'll show you to you in the garage. It's situated right about here, and the two cables go down underneath the tractor and they go to this block here. Presently I just have it jimmy rigged so I can use the tractor while I'm repairing the cable assemblies. But those cable assemblies, because they run underneath the tractor, they're susceptible to collecting water in there. And there's no way of lubricating those cables when they're on the tractor without taking everything apart. So over the years that rust gets onto those little tiny cables and it rusts the cable through and they eventually just break. And that's what's happened to this tractor here, is the cable has broken. This is what the cable assembly consists of. This is what Kubota wants to sell you. A total assembly. This is the part that goes into on their transmission, and this is the part that's up beside your seat on with the controller on it. So what it consists of is these two cables. These are the ones that break down in this hollow down here, and none of this controller here or here breaks. Just the cable. $804 for that little bit of metal, which you don't have to buy the whole thing, because this part here, this cam here, does not wear out. There's nothing on there to wear out. This tractor has 2,900 hours on it, well used, never abused, and it's been just like brand new inside here. This case does not break, this cam does not break, this cam does not break. Nothing on this breaks other than the cable. If they were to sell just the one cable, make up just the one cable for sale, it'd be maybe a, whatever, $75 item, maybe, at the very most. But no, Kubota wants to sell the whole shooting match. I don't know what their real thinking is other than making money. And the other thing could be that they don't think we're smart enough to be able to change just the cable. It's not rocket science stuff. It can be done. Now, what we have decided to do is we have decided to make this cable up. I went down to the local hardware store, bought the right size of cable for this here, and get the ends. That's the problem, is to put the ends on these here. That's where the problem has been. I can't find anybody that has a crimping machine to put these ends on. Right there. I've tried to crimp them with a big Burndy crimper, but they just won't take. So I have devised a new way of doing it, and that's what I'm going to show you now. To get the hole small enough for that cable to go through, I drilled a 5/64 hole into the end of the cable, or the end of the stopper in the cable. And here I've already drilled it here just to show you. Can be done. Drill it all the way through, and then I back drill it ever so little bit, so that when the cable goes into the wire, into the stopper here, and then comes out the other end, it's going to have a little bit of room to flare out. So into this area here, I just drill down maybe a third of the way. A little tricky, but hopefully this will focus properly. To center punch the round shaft here, I've had to flatten the shaft ever so lightly on the grinder, just to make it make it flat so that the punch will take. So the hole in here is 5/32s, and the next one up here is whatever it is. It's 5/16 or 3/16 or something like that. Something or other, just to make the cable so it has a place to mushroom out when we go to weld. Now I can use a 6mm bolt here for the size of the cable end. I have the wherefore I can machine down a 1/4" bolt to exactly 5.65 millimeters in diameter, and that seems to be the exact perfect size for that for the wire end. Here's my first couple of attempts at silver soldering. I use industrial grade silver solder for the soldering portion of this project, and here's a couple of or here's the first attempt at silver soldering. You can see I went down and some of it came out at the bottom. Now these things, the cable has to turn immediately, so it cannot have any obstructions there at all. This is the top sheave here. It has to go in there, and this is not too bad. It'll do it on this one here, but on the bottom sheave, the one on the transmission, it will not. It's a tight fit in here. It's a very tight fit in here, and it will not turn enough to fit into that groove because one groove is lower than the other side, so the cable has to go this way. So try and make sure that there's none of this here silver solder comes through as I did here. The cable end has to be exactly 6 millimeters or slightly smaller in diameter, and the length, it has to be exactly 7 millimeters, because again, these sheaves, what they do is they rotate in a case, and there's none of it can be protruding out here or this side here. So make sure that you get these exactly 5.6 millimeters diameter and 7 millimeters long. I tried to crimp some, I did crimp some, I have crimped some other ones, but in crimping them, my crimper is so powerful that it just squeezes them and makes them fatter, and they're almost impossible to clean up. So by silver soldering them, I find that to be the best way. These cables have to be exactly 54¼ inches long. Total length of the cable. Not any longer, not any shorter. You can be shorter by maybe 1/4 inch, as long as they're both the same, because it has to be a balancing act in there. Here's the bottom part, goes on the transmission. There's your cam that does the shifting. The cables go into these slots here, and they feed like so. You can see the cable sticking out here. Okay, when you're making the cables up, you can make up one end first. At that point, stop. Don't do like I did the first time. I made up both ends, because you gotta feed this here in through the casing all the way out through the other end. The new cable will be coming through here. Now you can put the other end on. Otherwise, this end here will never go through. Either end will never go through that casing. So make sure that you put that cable in to the casing before you put the second end on. Okay, one other thing I want to show you, I almost made this mistake once. These adjusters, leave them in the case. Leave them in the case. Don't take them out, because if you take them out, you might put everything together and realize, no adjuster. Then you got to cut the cable and do the cable, solder the cable over again. These are, if they're tight and coming out, clean them up. They're an 8mm by 125 thread inside of here. This is your adjuster to adjust shift if the shifting isn't quite equal. So you can adjust either this way or that way. But the main thing is, make sure these are in place and that you only do one end of the cable, feed it through. Now do the other end of the cable once it's all been fed through. Something I would recommend is to clean that casing out. Use brake clean or whatever you have for solvents, because when you push that cable through, it might pick up some dirt in there. And in soldering, the only three things you have to know about soldering something, whether it's silver solder or lead solder or whatever soldering it is, the three things you have to know is that the area has to be clean where you're soldering. The area has to be clean where you're soldering, and the area has to be clean where you're soldering. Those are the only three things you have to know about soldering as far as I'm concerned. So by cleaning that cable out, that casing out, push the cable through, you don't get any gumbo on the end of that cable where you're going to be soldering. This is the part in the transmission. So I have the cable fed through. Almost made a mistake on that one. I forgot to put this one part on. But far end of the cables. Yes. Both ends are on. Everything's fed through. Yes. And now I have measured. You can see maybe see my little mark right there. Where's my camera? Here we are. I made a little mark there. 54 and a quarter is the length. Making a cut there. That's the total length of the cable, because the little end goes on the cable. Here's our end here, and we feed it through. Sometimes they're a little tough to get in there because I do drill that hole so small. So when you put it on, twirl the stop with the cable, the way the cable spirals, and it should go on there. Okay, did go on there, a little bit of grief, not much. Now I'll take a little wee tiny pair of pliers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flare this back a little wee bit, make it look like a mushroom. Like so. This place now gives it a place for the silver solder to go in, and so it won't allow the cable to be pulled through the stopper. That's not bad. Where's the camera here? I hope that's focusing. Now, because we had that little recess drill in it, I'm going to pull that right inside there and ever so lightly pull it in, and it's ready for soldering. To try and prevent the solder from flowing all the way through and down the other side of the cable, I'm using some of my grandchildren's, what is this stuff? Play-Doh. So I just pack this around underneath and push it up fairly tight. Just like so. Okay, so we put a little wee bit of silver solder paste on that. And you're probably going to notice that I'm using my torch here, but that's okay. Flame is a flame, and it will definitely be hot enough. Okay, it's soldered. Don't be quick to grab it either. Now we'll dress it up a little bit. Give the kids back their Play-Doh if they want it. If not, we'll buy them some new stuff. And nothing came out the bottom, so that Play-Doh does work. So now we'll just dress this up a little wee bit. to get the excess silver solder off of it. In the case of silver soldering or soldering of anything, excess is not really very good. But now you got to take the excess off. Sometimes they say little is good, lots is better, more is better. Well, not in this case here, because like I said, you got to take this off here. Okay. Just got to try it on that cam. Yes. Good. Okay, now, when I say these got to be exactly 7 millimeters, I mean exactly 7 millimeters, because again, they got to go inside those cams, and those cams go into a housing, and there's no room for excess in those at all. So, what I've been doing is just check my measure here. Yeah, 6.79 millimeters. Yeah, a little rough way of doing it, but that's okay, it gets it done. Yes. Now, cut that off of there. And first class. Now what I did on that, just to give you a little sneak preview on this one here, this is bolt, a 1/4 inch bolt. Like I say, I machined it down to 6.65 millimeters. Right at the end here, I give it a slight chamfer on the grinder. I just went around ever so slightly, because the holes in these here are not exactly the same. The hole here is 6 millimeters, but inside here it tapers down ever so lightly. So this cable can only go in one way. And I know you can't see it, but there's a taper on there. I ground that taper so that it fits perfectly flush in there now. And this is now all ready to go back together on the tractor. That part I won't show you, because if you've done one or have taken it apart, you have already seen excuse me, how it goes together. The biggest thing I find that there is no way of lubricating these cables after it's all put together. So put some fluid. I use fluid film because it's it's got a little bit of slowness for it to move. It's not like the WD stuff and some other stuff. You want something in there that's going to be moving around in there very slowly and stay in there, because where that cable goes underneath the bottom of the tractor, it loops underneath there, and that's where any water will accumulate in there, and it will it loops in there like that, and it will accumulate water in the bottom area. Many times in the winter I've had to start the tractor up, and I've had to put the torch on these here cables just to get the water ice moving again, the water moving because it's frozen. So put some kind of, like I say, I use fluid film, and it seems to do a good job for anything that's confined like that. You want it to stay in there. You don't want it pouring out by the time you get it all back together again. So lots of lubrication in both cam areas, this area here and the top end. Lots of lubrication in there. Again, something that's good that'll stay there, because you cannot get at this stuff. Once it's put together, and you've seen it already yourselves, once it's put together, it's a sealed unit. So put a little bit of thought into lubricating it now, and hopefully this will help you in repairing this, because like I said, it's a $910 with the GST in it. It's an awful chunk of money for the little bit that you get. That for what you really need, is a terrible chunk of money. Something I'm going to do here is I'm going to what they've done here is they've slashed a fuel line by the looks of it. I'm going to put a fuel line on this here and give it a little more longevity too. The cable that I'm using is just some cable from Home Hardware, local Home Hardware store here, and the size of the cable in millimeters is 1.52 millimeters in diameter, and it's I don't think it's stainless. No, it's not stainless. So, but very pliable, because like I say, it has to be very pliable cable. So we have the final results here now of the unit once it's all assembled. We put some extra rubber protection around the cables, some old fuel line. A little reminder there that when I do get around to put it on, make sure it's lubed up. A couple little secrets, maybe not secrets, but items I want to mention here. When you're doing the detent on this gear shift lever, when you first take it apart, take that spring out of there. There's a it's on this side here. There's a spring in there. There's the detent down in there, the pin. There's a spring inside of here, and a Allen head retainer here. Take that apart after you've disassembled it. Take that all apart in there. Clean that spring out. It seems to be a home for it to stay in there quite readily, and it's a real beggar to do once it's on the machine. So again, that detent will fall out of there once that pin is removed, or that lever is removed. Take and clean that all out. Second thing is, on this portion here, there is a there's a keyway on this shaft, and it has to go in through the collar. The keyway has to go into the collar of this housing here. So what I did was I marked, I don't know if we can see that or not, I put a little mark exactly where the keyway is, so when I'm lining it up and I'm pushing that pin up in through there, that it goes blind on you. You can't see the keyway. So by having that little mark on there, you can line it up much easier. So a couple little tricks there that I've learned, because I've had this apart a couple times now. If you get the cables going through the first time without having to do it 2 or 3 times as I did, it costs you a total of maybe $7 compared to $910. This is an excerpt from the shop manual for the L2850 for the install and adjustment of the shifter cable assembly. So this is hopefully this stays in focus. You can pause this and print it out if you wish, or whatever, read it through. So hopefully that's a little bit more help. Any help is good help, they say. I thank you very much for looking at this video, and hopefully it'll help you. Thank you.